weird. I don't know.
You're listening to the Hal Sparks radio program, mega worldwide.
You're in stealth mode.
Was being so charming.
Video streaming at halsparks.com.
I don't care for you or for the putrid sludge you're troweling out.
Puss-faced little pimp stick.
True progressive talk.
Might be a good time for you guys to give up.
I'm very happy today. Like, some amazing guests. Everybody's trying their best to try and make up for the gap that is Johnny Million being away this weekend. He'll be back next week. Thank you again, Boston Brian. And Philip Ittner joins us right now. He's in Kiev. How are you, my friend?
Good. Thanks, Hal.
There's a ton to talk about. The president of the Russian Wrestling Federation saying that Russia should go to the 2024 Olympics in tanks, I thought was adorable. Zelensky being called the shame of the Jewish people by Vladimir Putin.
I have Jewish friends, and they don't like you.
Yeah.
That's paraphrasing.
And none of my Jewish friends like you.
None
and you're
of
not
my
a real
Jewish
one.
friends like
Yeah,
you.
right. That's so weird. And there is a what's the latest in terms of where you are? Catch us up on your experience in Kiev, and then we'll address both chat room questions and the some of the major issues that have happened this week with the offensive, which seems to be in full swing. It is growing with intensity every day.
Yeah, kind of how we expected it. Everybody just be aware also, my internet connection has been acting up all week. So if I suddenly disappear, don't freak out.
Okay.
So things are okay here in Kiev. We had a really intense morning. Lots of incoming munitions, missiles and the like, kinjals apparently. It happened while there was a delegation here from Africa, a variety of African nations had arrived in Kiev, including South Africa, a member of the BRICS Association, which kind of puts them
a weird
in
statement from
a bit
him.
of a bind.
Yeah.
And
real quick, the South African president said, I think it was Russian missile strikes don't contribute to peace, to restoring peace or whatever, which is the first of any kind of walk away. I thought the BRICS was rock solid and they were towing the line, and that was the whole story. And then all of a sudden,
well, he also did. He did also toe the line a bit, though. Also at the same time,
yeah, he's going to. But that's any move at all was amazing.
I mean, the press corps saw them going down into air raid shelters, and then the head of South Africa came out and said, I don't know. What are you talking about? An attack? I didn't know anything about an attack. Russian missiles? I don't know what you're talking about, sort of thing. And everybody was like, dude, we have you going into the air raid shelter. Right. So he had to kind of walk that back a little bit. But
that was the premise.
My good friend Vlad would never. Yeah, my good friend Vlad would never send a missile over while I'm here. Well, okay. So that was that this morning. That was pretty interesting. Yeah, as you mentioned, the offensive is continuing. They're making slow but steady advances. It's more like if an American football game, you're marching. They're marching the ball down the field. They're not doing any kind of long pass, passing games where they're trying to gain a bunch of yardage at any one time. No, it's get to the line of scrimmage, pick up the ball, take the ball 2 or 3 yards. Hold, reform, take another 2 or 3 yards, and you hope to get to the line. You hope to get to the 10-yard line and get another go, and then eventually you keep moving down the field that way, and you get into the end zone. That's kind of how my analogy for what the offensive is looking like, because I think a lot of people still are thinking that this is going to be these kind of things like we saw in Kherson or Kharkiv, where there's this strike force that just pierces through and goes for an objective. That analogy would be a passing play in football, but no, it's going to be more like moving down the field, steady, taking, and and the Ukrainians aren't upset about that, because every bit of Ukrainian land that they recover is another village or town or city. Even when we get to that, maybe when we get to Mariupol and stuff. Melitopol or something. These are Ukrainians that have been living under Russian occupation. And, even if it's a small advancement and it only, liberates a village of, 700 people or something like that, that's 700 people who aren't living with Russian soldiers billeted in their town.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's fascinating to me, and in relation to like the language around the South African president, and he said this that it was not helpful at a joint press conference where he was trying to we need to tamp down both sides. He both sided it, which is pretty normal language for the fake peacenik movement that we have, and the those that sympathize with Russia, especially when they lean towards a ceasefire, because it gives Russia a chance to reload, which is the way that they look at it, and they've admitted to looking at it that way. It's the way all their media talks about it. It's the way Putin himself talks about it. But the fact that the South African president actually went over that line is, I do see movements in the armor around the messaging from supposedly vassal states in a way that we've never seen before. And he's the lightest example, but look at how Kazakhstan is acting. Look at how Dagestan is acting. Look at the Georgians as far as what they're doing. There's a recognition that Russia is headed towards its own self-created demise, and there may be an exit ramp. They seem to be seeing an exit ramp for themselves. Russia, by the way, I'm pretty sure Russia's GDP has now slipped below that of Japan's for the first time in, 50 years or 30 years. For all those, the sanctions did nothing stuff. Anyway, so there's, and you were on a roll, and I'm sorry I interrupted you on that part of it before.
No, it's all right.
Yeah.
No, that's about it. You talk about exit ramps. It makes me think about what I'm sure you and Boston Brian were talking about, was if he just gave back the papers, if Russia would just leave, this would be over. This would end. But you just can't get it through your head that you're never going to win here. And they're like a dog with a bone. They can't let it go. And it's okay, well then we're going to have to do this the hard way. So the offensive is making progress. You make a very good point. It's getting harder and harder to defend Russia when they do things like blow up dams and send out rape squads, and all the stories of torture and stuff that we're going to hear as the offensive progresses and towns are liberated. We're going to hear about war crimes. I am. If I were a betting man, I'd put money on it. As grim as that is. But it's you can bet, you can expect it. There are going to be stories of Russian soldiers abusing Ukrainians.
Well, in that way, we'll talk about this on the other side. Of course, we're going to take questions from people in our chat room at twitch.tv/HalSparks or at infotainmentwars.com and on our Facebook page. Do you think? Well, I kind of want to save to the other side of it, but the South African president was taken to Bucha. They went as part of a delegation, and they went to Bucha. And I can't imagine that not having an impact, especially considering what South Africa has been through, and the Peace and Reconciliation Project and all the post-apartheid stuff that they've got to be aware of. This is the kind of stuff that happens. And how, their take on it is going to be affected by the fact that they're going to be looking at where these mass graves were. They're going to be talking to and seeing the victims themselves, the parents of the victims, the family members, people who are injured in this or attacked in this or sexually assaulted.
Investigators.
Yes. They're going to meet the international investigators.
Who have the receipts, who have the evidence. They're collecting it right now. Yeah.
And who South Africa counts on for their own process, and other African nations also count on to come in and prove who was in the wrong in civil wars and other stuff. It's you take their word everywhere else, but here, is that how it's going to work? We got to take a break. We'll be back right after this with more Philip Ittner on HalSparks radio program Mega Worldwide on WCPT Radio, Chicago's Progressive Talk.
Attention, attention, stop what you're doing. Because we're coming back to the Hal Sparks radio program, Mega Worldwide.
They went a little crazy with it, and I appreciate it.
Now let's get back with Hal Sparks radio program, Mega Worldwide.
One of the biggest changes, Philip Ittner's joining us from Kiev, and while we have you here, one of the biggest changes I saw was this movement from, I think it wasn't van der Leyen, it was, anyways, the NATO head, and they asked Biden about this, about speeding up and removing the map for addition to NATO by Ukraine. And Biden, is being a little more tepid about it, but they're definitely moving in that direction. His quote was, "I think they've done everything related to demonstrating the ability to coordinate militarily, but there's a whole issue of, is their system secure? Is it non-corrupt? Does it meet all the standards every other nation in NATO does? I think it will. I think it can, but it's not automatic." So he might be against removing the map, but shortening it.
I agree.
Yep.
I agree. I love this country. I truly do. I wouldn't be here if I didn't. But
it's got
am
work
not
to do.
going to wear any rose-colored glasses. There's a lot of work to be done. There's currently right now there's a corruption scandal internally within within the government. They've got this probe into abuse of funds for the Ministry of Defense. Like $19,000. I mean, it might be the same kind of thing that we do with our black budgets and things like that, but there's a whole scandal going on. There's tensions between Klitschko and Zelensky over an incident where an air raid shelter was left locked, and so people couldn't get in, and somebody was killed. There are issues of contention here, and I don't think they are ready to join NATO quite yet, frankly. I think they need to clean up corruption. I think they need to. I think as good as their military is, and it is currently, and I agree with a lot of experts on this, it is the best military on the European continent, hands down. There's no rival. These guys are battle hardened. They're inventive. They're tactically sound. They're strategically sound. It's a formidable armed force, but it will take slotting into NATO. They're still very Soviet in many ways. Their structure, the equipment they use, things like that. So it's going to be a long road before they're actually part of NATO. But this talk of them joining NATO and looking upon it favorably is the exact right kind of dialogue that should be happening in public, because we need to start telling the Russians, there's going to come a day where the Ukrainians are part of the family of nations in Europe, and if you attack them again, you're attacking everybody. So an attack on one is an attack on all. So ultimately, the idea that Ukraine is going to be part of the European structure, both defensively and economically, is something that we should start talking about right now.
Yeah, there's a certain level of inevitability that everybody is working towards, because it's understood that all things being equal and not being attacked by Russia, it had already happened in terms of the EU connection. And then the NATO connection would have been something that they would have taken, patient time with had they never been attacked. But it would have eventually happened as well, just for their own safety, because of Russia's, even just the 2014 attack would be reasoning enough to do that. That said, by the way, the New York Times is reporting in their investigation that Russia deliberately blew up the Kakhovka dam. Now their report specifically is saying the Russians hit it where they knew it was the weakest because they built it. Now that said, Soviet engineers in the area that were Ukrainian, Russian, whatever, would obviously be aware of that too, one would think. And they would work on it because it's been in Ukraine for a long time. But that said, it makes way more sense.
Yeah, and it also, I mean, they were in possession of the dam at the time.
Right.
They're militarily, they were in possession of the dam at the time. So, to blow a dam, and John Sweeney and I discussed this in the interview that I posted, and I tried to fix it of its audio problems, but it's still a vlog worth checking out. Sweeney and I talked about this at a certain extent, because there was a seismic monitoring that showed it was a single blast, and you cannot blow up a dam like that with a
Yeah.
single piece of munition. It's
Right.
not possible. You need to place a charge.
Mm-hmm.
Short of dropping like the mother of all bombs or something atomic, a nuclear weapon,
Right.
something non-conventional. There's no weaponry that does it short of, a Moab. So the fact that there was a single seismic explosion monitored shows you that somebody planted something somewhere. And the argument
Right.
that somehow Ukraine was able to sneak into the dam, because the New York Times article indicates that it was internal within the dam, which is its weakest point. Because if you just put a mine at the base of the dam,
Yeah. You'll
you're
crack
exerting a
it.
lot of
Yeah.
kinetic. You'll crack it, but you exert a lot of kinetic energy the other direction, because
Right.
the dam itself will. But if you put it inside the dam, which only the Russians could do, your explosion is going to go both ways. It's going to go into the reservoir, and it's going to blast out into the open land where the water then eventually went flooding. There's no question that the Russians, but that the Russians did it. And I'm just so tired of even
Mhm.
entertaining. Well, what about you? Oh, but we don't know. We don't know. Well, sure, we don't know for sure,
Well, this goes
but we know.
to the whole
But we know, and they
this
did it.
goes to the Nord Stream pipeline concept as well,
Yep.
which is like in this particular case, if the biggest thing that I think as far as artillery that could do something like this would be a series of HIMARS attacks or something. They would have to be, if not one
Yeah.
giant thing, it would have to be all of them hitting at once. And you would have nothing but footage of the arc of these missiles coming
Yeah.
in nonstop, because they wouldn't all be perfect. You would hear them coming from a mile away. They would be warning people.
That's right.
They would it's absurd. So and again, the idea that Ukraine has any kind of weapon that size, or could have snuck in with scuba gear and put in a charge that big, unbeknownst to the Russians, is almost more embarrassing to their military might than just admitting they blew it up themselves to flood the area so that they would make ground harder to traverse for the Ukrainian forces when the onslaught came. The tactical aspect of
Ecological
it makes
disaster
total
be
sense.
damned.
Right, they don't care. And it's I mean, that part's fascinating. So obviously they did that. And then in terms of Nord Stream, again, we've talked about this a bunch of times. They have all the sensor data. They have all the cameras. They have all the underwater cameras for the entire area. They have all the sensor data for where the exact second the eruption happened, where it happened to the inch. And Russia's not releasing that information. Why?
Yep.
Why is the rest of the world responsible for their secrecy? Because if they released it and it
Well,
really
and we've
was
talked about
us or
yeah,
Ukrainians or
we've talked
whoever,
about this before, right? Well, we've talked about this before. You can't have it both ways if you're Russia. When you're trying to promote and sell the Nord Stream pipeline, you say, "Oh, it's the most secure, monitored stretch of undersea pipe that exists on the globe." And then when it goes boom, to go, "We don't know what happened."
right?
Gazprom, the company, the state-run company that does all of Russia's oil and gas, has all of this information, and whether or not it reveals anything or not, the fact that they are not um, uh, they're not revealing it or putting it out there in any significant way makes me very skeptical about what they know and what really happened there. And again, other idiots who, and let's not go by names, but well, there's Seymour Hersh, of course, but all the hangers on who went with Hersh's Substack thing, they have come to a conclusion, and they have accepted
Right.
that conclusion because it plays into their narrative. I am not saying that the Russians did it. I am saying that it is suspicious that Gazprom has not released its data. I am furthermore saying I don't know. I don't know who did it. The Americans
Right.
could have done it. The Brits could have done it. There any number. The Ukrainians, I mean, as far fetched as it is, I suppose it's possible, but that's a high bar to get over for the
Right.
Ukrainians. But where there's a will, there's a way. or the Russians did. I don't know. What bothers me with the
Neither do
Tankies
they.
and the Seymour Hirsches of the world is they don't either. But they are coming to a conclusion going, aha, you see, we have manipulated this war. We created this war. It plays into their narrative. And so they're going to just skip over the whole, well, what about an investigation? And I want to see proof. I don't want to hear speculation. And why hasn't Gazprom released its evidence? All that kind of stuff. No, that goes out the window. We've already decided that the West and the Americans wanted this war over Ukraine with the Russians, and they manipulated the whole thing to get the Germans on side, and it's all the dastardly Americans' fault.
And
well,
I would say, I would say to them that one of the reasons why you don't want innocent people in jail, why you don't want people railroaded on charges just to arrest somebody, one of the reasons, besides the fact that that innocent person is victimized and you have two victims in this situation, is because you allow the person that did it to walk free. And that seems to be the methodology in this situation. If those of them, you could say that they have a cozy relationship with Russia, or they're just protective about their own ideals, where they will just throw everything under the bus and they don't kind of care. They'll cozy up to the Kremlin talking points, because if to admit that they're wrong means admitting that they are wrong, and they won't ever do that. So in the case of Hirsch or Brand or any of these other idiots, where I don't think they're being paid directly, they see their narrative being undermined, and so therefore they go and shore it up elsewhere. And in this particular case, I don't have a problem with you saying, I find this part hinky. I find this strange. Why? I had a source that told me this, and that contradicts what I'm seeing elsewhere. That's very different from saying the U.S. absolutely did this. A guy I know inside the intelligence community who's been feeding me stuff for years told me this. Meanwhile, everyone else is saying, look, all the Russians would have to do is release the video of the sensors, from the sensors that they have all along the pipeline undersea, where you've seen pictures of the pipeline. That's what those are from. Why don't they have the footage of the second that it happened? If they promised the European Union, like you said, that this would be the most leak-proof one, if you get into this, Nord Stream 2 will be way more safe environmentally, because the Europeans care a lot about environmental issues, even as they continue to use petroleum products. They want it to make sure it doesn't leak into the ocean, it doesn't cause it. Don't worry about it. We got sensors all over the place. We got cameras all over the place. The second there's a leak, we're on it. And then they're like, we were blind. We didn't see it happen. Nothing. No one looked. The guy walked away.
And
from
again,
the
to
station.
go back to go to Hirsch's thing, and I don't want to keep going back to Hirsch's thing, but Hirsch's things, the premise is that they went down there, an American SEAL team presumably went down there and set charges like 3 months before the naval exercise that was meant to kind of cover this. So you're telling me that there was a set explosive charge on the pipeline for 3 months, and the Russians didn't do anything about it?
Right.
You know, it starts to fall apart, and all of it, again, who benefits? Quo vadis. That's fine. The Americans, the West, benefited from if you believe that, you know, supporting Ukraine is their dastardly design. Okay, fine. You know. But you know, there's still not proof. Just because they had the motive and the means and they benefited doesn't mean that the Yanks did it.
We have to take a break. But you and I wouldn't have a problem with their normal kind of suspicious USA bad nonsense if they weren't speaking in absolutes.
If it was a SEAL team, let's bring it out into the open. Let's absolutely show your receipts, show your proof, show your evidence, and then we will take it from there. But it's the presumption that it was because it fits your narrative that gets me going.
Right. We'll be back right after this. It's the House Parks Radio program, Mega Worldwide, on WCPT Radio, Chicago's Progressive Talk. Yeah. I know I'm only on 1 day a week. I get it. I'm going to have to jump on GarageBand and start sawing something together. This is the House Bar Show. And a guitar note, and then progressive, and all. Yeah, it's going to be good.
Hey, Hal, did you mean something like this?
This is the House Bar Show. And a guitar note, and then progressive,
and all. Yeah, it's going to be good.
The Hal Sparks radio program, mega worldwide.
Yeah, it's going to be good.
Welcome back to the show. Next week on my live stream, it looks like I'm going to have Dee Snider, formerly of Twisted Sister, and of course, many other projects.
No
a
way,
lovely
really?
human being. Yeah, on the show. I've sung with him a couple times. I learned a thing or two. He's a good dude. He's a really good human being, and he's going to be on. We'll talk about his time in front of the Congress a little bit.
Part of my adolescence.
Oh yeah, and he's. You'll be happy to know.
Yeah.
You know that thing about where people are like, "Don't meet your heroes. It's always disappointing." I have not found that to be true at all. Like honest to God,
Any guy that would actually go up on the hill. I remember when he went up on the hill.
Yeah,
and
with Frank Zappa and John Denver. What a where's that?
That's
super
right.
group?
I remember that. And I remember him taking on who was the one who put the labels on the records? Tipper
Gore.
was it? No. Was it Tipper Gore?
It was Al Gore's wife was in charge of the PMRC, the Parents Music Resource Council.
Yeah.
That
anybody
was one of the reasons
who would go up on the hill and test and give testimony on the hill. Good man. So cool.
Well,
good on you.
And again, Gore was in many ways Clinton's Pence. Clinton was seen as a little freewheeling and a little Southern and a little not, conservative enough for some folks. They might, he and his wife with their libertine relationship stuff and all that they were concerned about. So Gore was supposed to be this like straight-laced dude whose wife was, watching out for the children. And that's why they thought he'd be a good running mate. Seriously. So, quick question. One is, and Ed's 3D Tech, I'll get to you in 1 second. The question was, is Ukraine any more corrupt than Turkey in terms of NATO? And I think that's a great question.
It's a good point. It's a good question. It's different, but I would say that, without crunching it all down, it's a very good point. I mean, Turkey is badly corrupt. And Erdogan has only made it worse. So I don't know if Ukraine is better or worse. I'd say up until recently, Ukraine, you could say without a doubt, was worse. But they're really making strong efforts, especially because they know that when the war is over, it's got to be worth it. It's got to count for something.
And there's a question whether Turkey's going the other direction. Does Turkey think ultimately that any of its survival goes the other direction? I doubt it. And I think, their economic picture in and of itself paints that picture. I think they're just in a desperate situation. They can't afford to lose any friends at all. And since NATO is locked in, they can afford to play footsie with Russia in a way that they wouldn't normally. But they're just, they can't afford oil on the standard market with what the Saudis are doing. So they've got to cozy up and do a little bit of under the table stuff with Russia or they won't survive. That's the idea. That's where I think Erdogan is in particular. That said, the next question was from Ed's 3D Tech. Would ATA CMS, the attack, help Ukraine move attack helicopters further from the front for Russian ministry, the Ministry of Defense? So does it help them create space?
It helps them create space. It would push back Russian helicopters. You're right. They would have to be at a refit and resupply point well beyond the ATACMS, which would actually almost push them back on across the border. I mean, those ATACMS, you're already. I mean, so one of the major fights is around Zaporozhye. Zaporozhye, if you push east and you get across the river, you're already pretty much with ATACMS, if they had them, able to hit anything on Ukrainian soil. 1991 border soil, and that would include Donbass. So, yeah, it would absolutely push back their attack helicopters, which would be a really good thing. Give them ATACMS. Give them ATACMS.
Right.
I mean, it's ridiculous that we haven't done it already. Anyhow, yeah,
Right.
no, just
Yeah,
give him
exactly.
everything on.
And then there was a what was the other question besides family? Oh, Coretta wants to know, besides family, what do you miss most about the U.S. right now? And Boss
Getting
Brian will hook
my
you up with Phil. I'll take care of it.
that would be great.
Mhm.
I mean, it's of course there are little things, or well, not so little, but there are things that you can well imagine, like food and restaurants, and my A1 steak sauce, which you can't get here, and I love on a steak. I know some people think that's blasphemy, but I do.
Yeah.
Silly little things like that. Bigger picture, I miss my life that I had, that I
Mhm.
had made plans, and I was setting up a production company, and I was getting out of, big corporate TV news. I
Mhm.
wasn't go knocking on CBS or NBC or ABC's door or CNN, what have you. I was going to strike out on my own with a production company, and I'm still going to do that. But the fact that I have to put it on hold because of
Mhm.
this, because
Right.
of promises I made to people here, which I'm holding myself accountable to, uh, it's just gonna have to wait.
Mhm. Right. That makes a lot of sense. Let's see, where are we? We're good on. Okay. I want to make sure I didn't miss the other question I had up there. There you go. Oh yeah, there we go. Based on your current understanding, if you had your feet to the fire, which would you say the current counteroffensive? Which way would you say the current counteroffensive seems to be going? Yeah, like, I
If
mean,
you
it's hard
really
to tell,
push
but
me on it, I would say east. I would say east.
mhm.
I think the going for Mariupol from Zaporizhia, that's that's the one that
Sure.
you really want to succeed.
Mhm.
Going south, that's another option because of the flooding. That gets a little bit more tricky, but the whole thing is trying to break the land bridge from Russia to Crimea. And so you're
Right.
either going to, the
I think it
shortest
meant
distance is
just success
basically,
wise too. I think also success
oh, what's
wise.
being,
Yeah,
what
it's
is
going.
being more successful right now.
Hmm.
I think east. I think also east. I think also east. I mean, Bakhmut. There's some advances being made there. Um,
Hmm.
So I think the direct push from Ukraine towards the sea, as opposed to down towards the south to cut off the land bridge, is the more likely to be successful. But look, we're just going to have to wait and see. It's very frustrating, but it's operational
Right.
security takes precedence.
Sure. The apparently it's breaking. Ukraine has asked the FATF to declare Russia a state sponsor of terrorism, and European Parliament has done. Well, they've already done so. So I think they're asking other
Yeah, I thought they
organizations to
already
follow
did
up on.
that.
Yeah, the Federation. Is it the Federation of African Nations? Hold on one second. There it is.
Oh,
Um,
well, that would
yeah,
make sense given the delegation was here
the
now.
FATF.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, because they
Um,
are.
mhm.
They are state sponsors of terrorism.
Yes.
100%.
Right. So
I mean, it's exhibited here for everybody to see, but in addition to that, they undermine democracies. They do assassinations globally. They attack. They do information warfare, which is a different kind of terrorism, but it's still twisting people's minds and creating terror through that kind of endeavor. They are a state sponsor of terrorism, 100%, and so everybody should be designating them. I mean, I'd like to see it happen in the UN. You know,
yeah.
they shouldn't even be
Uh,
on the Security Council, frankly, in a
yeah,
lot of
that I
people's
think is the
opinion, and I
weirdest part.
kind of share that opinion.
And the U.S. has started talking about reforming how people are chosen for the Security Council and to head the Security Council. After that, dust up the fact that it became Russia's turn automatically to do it, even though they were engaged in an offensive war against one of their neighbors, which seems a little counterintuitive. You know what I mean? You could make an argument that past administrations like the Bush administration would want it, would want that rule not to be engaged because we wouldn't have been able to do it while we were in Iraq. And I would argue that when we did a preemptive attack on Iraq, we shouldn't have run during the time we were there. Gives you impetus to not be there if it's a war of aggression. That said, if your allies and the other countries there say no, they had to do this and we agree with it, they could vote specifically to say you should be allowed to do it. And that means at least people are having a say in this, as opposed to this like Wheel of Fortune idiocy, where they just spin it and whoever it lands on, no matter what they're up to, you get to run things for a while. It just seems goofy, especially when it comes to like the fact that the UN Security Council, those folks, they don't get to see all of every nation's intel, but they get to see most of it. And that's one of the reasons why, like, Russia had 2 spots where they felt like, oh, Russia's making a comeback. Did you notice how the first time they did it, it was right around the attack. It was February of 2022. And then the next time they're like, oh, Russia's finally pushing back, like 3 weeks after they were running the UN Security Council for a little while, because they got access to the materials and satellites and all that kind of stuff that they didn't have in between. It's just so stupid. Like, the crucial one-to-one briefings that are different. So it was odd. I find that very strange. So we got to take a break. When we come back, more of your questions for Phil Ittner. This is the House Sparks radio program, Mega Worldwide.
I am happy, you are happy, let us be happy together, whether the weather is cloudy or sunny. I will always be your funny honey bunny. I am lucky, you are lucky, let us get lucky together, whether the weather is cloudy or breezy. I'll be there to say, hey, come on, let's take it easy. 'Cause isn't it nice to have the friends that you do? And isn't it nice that the sky is so blue? And isn't it nice to say I love you, chugga chugga choo choo, woo woo. I am smiling, you are smiling, let us smile together, whether the weather is cloudy or stormy. I will still be there in the morning, I'll be right by your side in the morning. I'll make you breakfast in the morning, I hope that you like cereal.
Yay! So there's so much to this, Phil, where we do have a hard time finding good news that doesn't involve a certain amount of schadenfreude. That doesn't involve the fact that Trump got indicted this week and he's in a panic, and the money that he made from the boost in people donating is already spent. It didn't last 72 hours. It's gone. And arguably, it never made it even to his attorneys. So it's just vapor. And to any maggots who are watching the show, and I know we have a few, I don't know why you're here. You should be at donaldjtrump.com praying and giving money. I don't know why you still have any money in your bank account. What if you really care and America's going to die without him? Do you even MAGA, bro? So are there things like, what would you see is, and obviously the offensive is going on and it's very tough time for Ukraine, and it's going to be, and it's a very tough time for the Russians that are sent there. I saw a video of a conscript who, they were questioning, who, he was like, this will get me out of jail early, and I was there on a trumped up charge anyways, so I was hoping that, I wouldn't have to do any actual fighting, and I'd get out here, and then I found myself, and he's like, it's a sad story, and the Ukrainians that are talking to him are like, this is sad. This is just like, you shouldn't have to be here.
Yeah.
We're not your enemy. And so it was actually very heartwarming to see.
Also there are all sorts of stories of like Russian soldiers saying, please don't send us back, because if you do a prisoner exchange and we get sent back, they'll shoot us.
Yes, right.
Because we got captured. We do not send us back. And we are hearing a lot of those kind of stories of Russian soldiers saying, we don't want to be in a prisoner exchange because they'll shoot us. And they probably will. If there is there are not a lot of happy ending stories. It's been a pretty miserable week. But did you see just today the video released of Prigozhin eating his swallowing his pride, eating crow, and going and submitting his paperwork to place the Wagner group, the PCM, or PMC, Personal Military Corporation. Anyhow, there's a new law in Russia forcing them all to come under the umbrella of the Ministry of Defense, and begrudgingly Prigozhin had to do it. And there's a funny little video to watch with him with his
Mhm.
head hanging low, having to go
Right.
to I think it's a St. Petersburg registration office and submit his paperwork to put Wagner Group under the control of Shoigu. He probably didn't like that very much. So there's a
Right.
little bit of Schadenfreude, but there's a happy ending for you.
Yeah, I think that works.
And
Whatever.
I
I
can,
think. Yeah. Go
yeah,
ahead.
and I can give you a happy ending. I can give you another happy ending. Because you want to look at the silver linings of every cloud.
Yeah.
So Putin moving nukes into Belarus, lots of consternation about that, but it's a storm in a teacup. I know we don't want to take nukes lightly, but it's an indication to me, and also the conflict that is growing between Lukashenko and Putin about who actually controls those nukes is
Right.
interesting to me. But what the reason why I say there's a silver lining is because he's clearly he's having to do things like that because he knows he's losing, and it is still saber rattling. I'm sorry, but the day that Russia uses a nuclear weapon is the last day that Russia is effective as a military force. Because the
Right.
second they use a nuke anywhere in the world, unless they go
Everybody
full
leaves.
bore,
Everybody's out. Right.
they are the bad guys.
Mm-hmm.
And nobody's going to defend them. And NATO will go, we're taking all your toys away and done, enough.
Mm-hmm.
So they're not, they're putting the nukes on my opinion is they're putting the nukes on Belarus soil to scare us. They will not use nukes. I still feel pretty strongly about that, because they know that what happens after you use a nuke, because you make a military decision not
Yeah.
with the idea of this is what this military operation is going to achieve, but what will then happen, what is the likely response from the enemy, that being the West. And the West, if Russia decides to use a nuke or a limited nuclear exchange, and if there are any of us still around standing, in other words, that's it. It's over. It's done. Russia's military will be devastated, and they know it.
Mm-hmm.
So I still can't believe that they wouldn't use nukes. But look, you don't want to test them, do you? You don't. You got to stand up to a bully. But is he
Right.
completely crazy and really? I don't know. But I'm not freaked out by the Belarus deployment. So.
Yeah, I think a lot of this is meant to scare people on a scale that also gives the tankies that we talk about a lot something to talk about. Oh, now you've done it. Now America's done it. Oh, now they've done it. Now Russia's putting tactical nukes in in Belarus. This is it. This is and this is their fault. They shouldn't have started this because this is we made them do this, which is just ridiculous. Like I'm sorry, we made them lose a war they thought they would win in 6 days. Really? That's the justification for them putting tactical nukes in and blowing up their own dam. Like I gotta say, it's got to be getting harder and harder. Obviously, for the people who are all in, like Ritter and that crowd, it's they don't really care. They're just they're selling the line and that's all. But anybody who's got at least a toe in the pool of sanity at this point has got to be just like it's got to be getting harder and harder and harder every damn time to just start to sell this crap. It's just amazing to me.
And it's not going to last forever. And and in addition to that, they're going to keep losing territory. There's a lot of talk about the defenses that Russia has put in, and some of them are formidable. I got a good buddy of mine here who studies this very closely. Some of them are very strong defensive positions, but there's also territory that can be used to maneuver around those defenses. So it's not going to stop the Ukrainians.
Right.
They're going to keep, and I think, I personally, not being a soldier but being a war correspondent for a quarter of a century, I think this might be again another example of the exceptional military ability of Ukraine's forces. General Zaluzhny and General Syrskyi are both very cunning military leaders, and it's better to do it this way: slow, steady, bit by bit by bit, yard by yard down the field until you get to the end zone. This is a running game, and it is all about getting 2 yards here, 5 yards there, get to that 10-yard mark, then pick up the ball, start again,
Well,
5 yards, 6
effectively,
yards.
what they're also pushing back against is the entrenched aspect of the Russians dug in. They invaded quickly, dug in, built trenches. So you're going to have to move slowly across land with mines on it, and one that's been trenched anyways. So what you're going to want to do is get to the other side of those trenches at a measured pace and evenly. Once you clear those, the chances of the lines behind there being mined in any significant way or reinforcement being, nobody digs trenches 10 miles behind their other trench unless they think they're going to have to fall back at some point. And since the Russians have been, like, they run on macho, I don't see them doing it anytime soon. I don't see that. Why would they build another line of trenches behind their trenches unless they're like, we might need a place to go? Because they did this all at once. They did this in a lightning attack, essentially, on that part of the country. We're out of time, and I want to say, Phil, thank you so much for being here. We'll put you in touch with Boston Brian. I look forward to what you guys come up with.
Yeah, we'd love to.
We'll make that happen.
Sure.
And everybody else, don't forget to like, subscribe, support the show. Subscribe to Phil's YouTube channel. Absolutely. Subscribe to YouTube, Phil's YouTube channel. And, of course, like, subscribe, give a thumbs up, support the show in any way that you can. And if you can't, I'll see you next Saturday anyways. Take care of yourself and take care of somebody else. We'll see you soon.